Welcome to Permission to Evolve. I'm your host, Brandon Thielk. I'm a performance and life coach. I'm joined by my co-host and producer, Holly Deschenes. Today, we're getting into our flaws. Holly, how do you feel about that?
That's an interesting question. How do I feel about that? I mean, I think it's an acceptance. If there's an acceptance, everybody has flaws. It's just how well we accept them about ourselves. So I think it's a
Mhm,
good topic.
mhm.
This week, I taught a class with some people where we touched on some of that stuff and the
Mhm.
vulnerability of letting people know what you're not great at.
On the other side of it, it's usually pretty rewarding because these are things we feel alone with, or we feel like nobody else will accept them, and so we often hide these parts of ourselves. Which is a big theme we're continuously talking about here anyway. It's just kind of getting to the heart of perfectionism today. We're calling this one Permission to be Flawed. And the truth is we all have things we're working on. Everything is an ongoing process. You're never going to be finished. And it's just being able to zoom out and tune into the reality of that. Life is a journey. If we don't open these things up, if we don't come to terms with our insecurities, we lock a lot of shame away. We start to wear more and more of a mask where we feel disconnected from ourselves. This all kind of leads to that idea of perfectionism. And that can be a pretty miserable existence. I definitely adopted that mindset for probably most of my 20s. And it was a process of letting it go. And I still have my struggles there. But you just kind of get caught in this always picking yourself apart and yeah, it just really damages that relationship to yourself, which is a big part of what we're trying to accomplish here is to instill some self-compassion. The message is you're not alone. We all have things. These are universal problems mostly. The cool thing about it is when we work through one of our flaws, and I say the term flaw like loosely, because what does that really mean? I don't know. It's a judgment on ourselves, I think. But on the other side of it, when we dig into these insecurities and come to peace with them and acceptance, it's very freeing for ourselves. But then it also, we're able to hold that space of compassion for other people that are going through that similar struggle. That's a big part of what coaching is. It's trying to help people loosen their grip on the things that are holding them back. And a big part of that is vulnerability. I think many of us grow up with kind of two worlds. There's the public world and then there's the at-home world. And that's generally not the same thing. Many households are built on this illusion of appearances when you're in public, where you have to pretend like everything's great and perfect and suppress a lot of things in that process. Look over. This is where we can see a lot of kind of hypocritical tendencies, like maybe in our parents. Maybe they say one thing in public and another thing at home. This leads to a lot of confusion about what reality is for us because it's not consistent. There's the two versions. What this really does is it creates a split in us. And then we start to, yeah, I mean, we start to cultivate our own kind of fake persona to be accepted by others. And that's generally what's like acceptable in society. And it's interesting. So I'm rewatching The Sopranos right now. I don't know if
Okay.
you've ever seen them, but it was something that really stood out to me where it's like in the third season or something, but Tony was, his daughter had gone off to college and then she came back and he noticed like all these differences in her and where she's acting all proper and it's not the daughter he knows. His
Sure.
comment was, he's like, look at her, like she turned into a robot, and just kind of putting on the show to that public image that we're talking about. And I thought that was an interesting insight. I think that's what like I like deeper shows because of that, because there's kind of all these layers and levels to things. And just like that one statement, like said so much. I think that's kind of what we're talking about here is there's what's acceptable like in public and what's acceptable in public is generally not true for us. Usually it's messy behind the scenes. Usually at home, that's the thing we really struggle with, the things when we're alone. And that's really what I think a lot of people, they adopt these personalities that are inauthentic because that's what's needed. And then that's what eats away at us. That's what makes us feel bad about ourselves because we don't feel like we're living our own life. We're feeling like what we're supposed to be living. And that can be really, really heavy. It creates a lot of anxieties. Imposter syndrome stems from this because when we're authentic, that we're in alignment with who we are, and we can really just like you don't have to calculate anything. It's not like strategic. You just like act from that place. But when we're operating from the mask, it's kind of like, oh, well, like I have to read this person and then I have to show up as who they want me to be in order for me to be accepted. All this stuff starts super early on for most of us, definitely in childhood. These are common themes of, I think the earliest versions of that are when you go away to school, it's like you got to be a good student or whatever. The school model isn't perfect for everybody. So a lot of people struggle with learning in those specific ways. And so it can pretty early on start to form these like negative self images of ourselves of like, yeah, I have to pretend I know what I'm doing. I have to fake it. I have to. And if I'm not lining up with expectations of everybody else, then there's something wrong with me. These things really hurt self worth. And it's kind of the beginnings of us, splitting our personality into like who we are and then who we're supposed to be. And that's what creates this big disconnect where, a lot of these anxieties, fears, the fear we're going to be found out can happen from that place. There's so much to this. We probably won't get it all in today. It's one of those ongoing topics of where we got caught up in the past. Where did we like start to learn I can't be who I am, I have to be something different. That's incredibly heartbreaking. Some people never get to live the authentic life. They're just kind of molded into something and then on live that forevermore. And so it's sad of like, I think we're all the best we can be when we're in tune with who we really are and we're acting from that place. We're going to be aligning our lives to support that. And that's really the goal of this work is to get people back to that basic, like, who were you before these things started happening? What can we bring forward from that? And how can we start to live in that light a little bit more?
Yeah, we've touched on it in previous podcasts, but the voice in your head or the inner critic, working through that's like a huge part of this in terms of flaws because that's coming through that. And I don't think it's all people, but I think most people too are generally like harder on themselves than they are on others. They're calling out things in their own mind that they maybe would never say out loud to another person. That's
Mhm,
part of those like deep flaws. And I think about it's hard in this exact moment for me to like pull stuff out of like a specific instance, like out of childhood, but I think about, things in high school and college age, maybe a little bit more, where it is like the the flaws came from like a comparison place. Like that's
mhm,
the noticing was in this like
mhm,
seems so easy for so and so, or why am I not as smart as? How come I can't get away with? How come I can't I ran track in high school. How come I can't run as fast as? Whatever the thing might
mhm,
be, right?
mhm. Yeah, I think comparison, like, yeah, as you get into those, primary like ego stage developments, high school, college, where, we're feeling a lot of insecurities at those stages. And so it's always this external focus, we're looking to what's around us and then we're trying to measure up to that. And so that says like it discounts the reality of everything of like we all have struggles going on and actually, some of us have natural tendencies that others don't. And so, in those early stages, like, yeah, if your gifts were just kind of natural, like, yeah, you're gonna excel in that area. But with everything we're focused on that maybe we say we want, there that person's also got things over here that they're struggling with that we don't see. And so all these things become very short-sighted, especially at those stages we really want just acceptance. We want to be liked by other people. That's a big boost in self-confidence if we're branching out from our parents and whether or not other people like us at that stage can really set the tone for a lot moving forward. A lot of very successful people generally that stage is very difficult and they develop this chip on their shoulder and then they work really hard. I think the main thing industry that comes to mind here is probably like tech, people that, just function more that way and maybe might not have social skills and things like that. It's generally a very tough time for them because the jocks that get celebrated and the popular kids or whatever, so it's like all these things, it develops this like this model of ourselves. And, oftentimes it's not healthy and it's not, it's just the environment. We're taking so much of that feedback from our environment that, the journey really is back to yourself because we do become externally focused and we're searching for that external validation. In that place, whatever we don't feel good about ourselves, we generally shame ourselves or we've been shamed by other people, made fun of, whatever it is. We fear the judgments of others. We don't want to be rejected. So in that not wanting to be rejected, we kind of mold ourselves into things that we think would be more likable by other people, by our peers. It's a stage. Once again, all these things are stages, and it's a very difficult stage. It's just like we don't want to get so locked into that time period that we have a difficult time moving forward. We don't want to carry those wounds with us for the rest of our lives. It's a common place people get stuck because we're just trying to figure it out and you want independence. So you're wanting to branch out from your parents, and at home that's generally a very mixed bag too. So it's just kind of like it's a time where you don't really ever get peace. And so you're just kind of searching to find your individuality, but often we fall into the trap of just kind of pretending we're something so that we're accepted. And in that place, things get overlooked. We strengthen the ego. The ego projects things externally. So it keeps us from actually coming to peace with these things. It's like, oh, I'm the only one that has this, and I'm not as good as these other people. And so I have to like hide this aspect to myself. And so basically we're trying to create this illusion that we have it all figured because the people that at that stage that are popular or cool, like everything is like kind of laid back and easy and all that stuff. But that's the energy of it, is that they have everything figured out. But once again, that's probably a mask for that person. They probably have all these things going on at home. These things they're really interesting dynamics. And, ultimately, if we don't address these things, then they stay insecurities for the rest of our life. And we keep trying to protect them. That's where we can lash out at other people, get passive aggressive. It keeps us from learning and growing because we're not able to get to the place where we're vulnerable to really open it up to dig in and learn these things. We could be struggling with similar problems throughout the duration of our life if we're not opening them up. This is relationship skills, social skills, let's get financial skills, things like that. All these life skills that we need. There can be so much shame around it if we're struggling with that from the get-go, that it's very difficult to pick up the pieces once you get going. It's, oh, I just have to keep stringing things along. And that's where we talked about before. It's like, yeah, that's why we have all these signals within us that create a lot of anxiety and stress. And it's just like, well, it's either we handle that stuff or it continues to get louder. That is what forms the inner critic, is generally the influences of our childhood and feedback from other people. In this work, if I take somebody back to like an embarrassing moment or something like that, it's almost like, well, one, it's like kind of locked away and it's got a lot of tension around it. But like once we get to it, it's just like this resounding, like, you remember very specific words. Let's say you're like made fun of or something like that. It like kind of freezes us in time where there's a part of us that's like terrified of that happening again. Well, and so what that does is it makes us play small. So I start to, it's either adopt the perfectionist mentality where I'm just trying to make everything perfect all the time to prevent that from happening. Or it's like I don't put myself in situations that challenge me because for the fear of that. So either way, I'm like stagnating. And perfectionism is like, yeah, that's generally being very hard on yourself and picking yourself apart constantly. In that place, that can be debilitating where we have a hard time taking action because we feel like we need to be this finished product. We feel like we need to have it all together in order to take steps. And the truth is like, growth really is this, it's messy. It's not having all the answers. It's being okay with critical feedback and like all this stuff. It's just like, well, it's either I stand still or regress, or I take some chances and move forward. And that often does at certain stages, that is a lot of failure. That's a lot of falling on your face. That's not knowing what you're doing, but just trying to figure it out. That's really what we're aiming for is we have to get the wheels turning in some of these areas that may have stagnated. And it's generally coming from those places of like, there's something about us that we feel is very flawed or we're not good enough when relative to our environment, people we're competing against, whatever it is. It's always this feeling of not being good enough. And so that stage right there, though, that when I don't feel good enough and I have an ambition or a drive, I'm going to use that as fuel to work really hard at something. That's the natural part of the journey is like, well, I think if I get really good at this thing and make it perfect, then people won't reject me. Then I'll be accepted. Yeah, but the whole time I'm on that journey, it's fueled by anger and resentment and bitterness, and I'm generally not very happy on that journey. But and I usually have this where I'm very self-critical and picking myself apart constantly, and this is definitely something I identify with, and it's like and that can only get us so far before we burn out because it's just like it's not built on good things. It's built on like in extreme versions. It could be like self hatred. It could be like some really intense thinking about yourself where you just always feel like you have to fix something about you. On the other side of this, when we do hit a wall with that mentality, and oftentimes there is a wall at some point, that's where we have to take a step back and reassess. And generally, that switch is going to be a big part of what we're doing here, which is developing that self compassion, making peace with these things rather than being driven by the pain of them.
Yeah. When the beating up on yourself or whatever, I think it's interesting because I think, and not to make it about perfection, but I think there's like different types, if that makes sense, and how it shows up. For me, like where you describe picking yourself apart, my perfectionism comes more from like it's a not good enough, but it's a not know enough. Like, well, I can't start the thing until I've done all the research or I've taken the class or I've done the whatever. And
Mhm,
so it shows up in my life and not as much recently, but in the past in this like, well, until I the reason this is the story I would tell myself. The reason that person over there is like doing that amazing is because they have all the answers already.
mhm.
And so I can't be as good as them until I have all the answers.
Well, and
Yeah.
that's why it's super important to actually have conversations with those people and see what their journey was like because it's generally like yeah they took action on things and they problem solved along the way and it's never complete knowledge. It's always evolving knowledge. And yeah, I mean, it's a fear, right? Like a delay is like, I'm going to put this off until I feel ready. And there's like truth to these things in some degree. Yeah, you do need to develop a skill. You do need to have some knowledge, like, but it's just like the, f- the expansions of those is generally going to come from experience. It's going to be coming from, okay, I'm going to go put myself out there in some way, and then that's going to give me more information to work with because I need to try things on. I because we could stay in the books all day, and there's it's common for people to just kind of stay in school forever to like delay real life. That's a common one. But because it's just, to be honest with you, it's like anything you're learning in school, like most of that goes out the window as soon as you show up in real life and you're just like, oh, I actually have to, yeah, I might have some sort of frameworks to work from, but it's like when we start interacting with real people and solving real problems, it's a very different experience. It's just kind of understanding that, it's why am I delaying? And so if I'm delaying, it's going to be there's something I think is like flawed about me that I can't put myself out there in this new way without because some sort of fears behind that. That could be embarrassment. That could be any of those things that we're talking about. But when it's an overextended period of time of like, okay, I'm kind of just in the lab on a regular basis here. I'm not actually putting any of this stuff to work. That's going to go on as long as we want it to. And we'll notice because we'll probably be making a lot of excuses about it. We'll be filling in the gaps to like justify why we're not moving forward. And but at the end of the day, like we really know the truth, like deep down. We're scared of something. That's the thing is we have to embrace vulnerabilities, we have to embrace flaws because that really is how we get our path forward. We have to get the journey started. And that generally isn't pretty, and that's okay. So the thing is, with social media, we have highlight reels, we have everybody being perfect all the time. And, but is that reality? Like, absolutely not. We all have these flawed comparisons going on. And it's just kind of understanding that we have to bring the attention back inward. We can't stay in the external focus, because if I'm just externally focused all the time, I'm reacting to things rather than responding to them, because I'm out of tune with what's going on inside, and I'm just being pulled in directions of what I think I should be doing. And that's the kind of that shiny object syndrome or whatever it is, where people jump from one thing because it's just like, oh, if I do this, this is going to solve all my problems. And no, that's not doing it. So this is going to solve all my problems. But you actually solve the problems inside. But we always need to get like back there, because yeah, most of all this stuff is just kind of wasted energy. Not to say that there's not some sort of development going on in that, but it's not really optimal because we're sticking with the same mindset. And the mindset, if it's fear based, if it's survival based, if I'm just trying to self preserve to and delay things, I can get really, really intellectually smart at things without ever actually doing anything in my life. There's plenty of people that just paralyze themselves with that. And that's sad, because I ultimately, like, we're here to live life. And, I often talk about the gauntlet. And the gauntlet, I say, that's when I'm going to like start to take some actions, and I'm going to get some feedback, and it's going to make me feel really insecure. People might be like shaming me to try and get me to go back to doing nothing again. That's all to like reinforce like what you're already doing. It always is always this acceptance of like, yeah, I know I'm not perfect, and I'm doing the best I can, and I'm trying to figure it out. There's the reflection work that we talk about here to understand yourself better, so that you can align your life in a more productive way that supports you. But then there is also like, I need to be putting myself out there in new ways to see what happens, because that's really where I'm going to start to build confidence, is when I work through those situations. And then I start disproving things about myself in that process. If I am putting myself out there, and I'm making things happen, that's going to be creating this internal conflict of like, oh, wait, yeah, I made all these judgments before I got in the game. And now that I'm in the game, I'm kind of seeing things differently. And so that starts to allow all of our preconceived judgments to start to fall away. And that gives us more to work with. We're starting to create this space of like, oh, like, I guess I don't have to trust my mind as much, because my mind literally just wants to keep everything the same all the time. We actually break out of that by putting ourselves in uncomfortable situations. That's why a lot of these meds and stuff are very dangerous, because it just like gets people stuck, because they don't have that feedback to go off of like, oh, why is this uncomfortable? Why is this challenging to me? Well, yeah, it's because something in your past like was painful for you, or you doubted yourself, and then you got stuck there. And that's your inner critic. That's this part of you that's telling you it's not safe to move forward. But, what if it's like something you like learned a long time ago, but you're still operating from a mindset of like a 7-year-old? That's commonly what I see. These things aren't reality anymore, but your mind thinks it is. And so that's where we need this detachment of, okay, my nervous system's just trying to protect me. That's all it's trying to do. And if I've got a lot of shame around something, which is going to be inherent in that word flawed, there's a negative judgment already. But if there's shame there, then, that is designed to shut me down. That's designed to, I need to hide this part of myself. It's not safe. Nobody understands. I'm alone with it. I'll be made fun of, or whatever it is. We get locked in these modes where it doesn't allow us to move forward. And then when we sit in that too long, that's when we become bitter and resentful towards people that are actually doing things. So the people that don't get paralyzed by the shame, if we're too tightly wound in the shame where we can't move forward, now that person's going to be projecting all that shame onto other people. Those are like the shit talkers online and stuff, the people that don't do anything, but then just point their finger at everybody because they're actually doing things. That's how that dynamic is created. Well, they're afraid of something, and it's easier to call things out in other people to try and make them feel insecure because that's just what they're feeling. They're insecure about themselves, and so they won't move. And so, really, through our flaws, that's how we develop our skills and our strengths. Is we have to give them attention, and we have to go deeper with them, because a flaw is just going to be like a surface judgment of like, oh, this is the bad thing, and so I'm going to deny this part of myself and stuff it away. But the more we do that, like, the more we're in this fight or flight on a regular basis where we're stressed out all the time and nothing ever feels good enough because we don't feel good enough. We get caught in these traps. That's why we create some space from the mind. We go back and we heal some of these things where you're caught up. And so healing simply just means we're bringing a broader perspective to a situation that was very isolating. So, yeah, maybe I got made fun of in school. But yeah, what if I could see, well, once I start to learn these dynamics, I'm like, well, everybody's just trying to be cool. Insecure people are the ones that generally like point out other people's flaws. Everybody's insecure at that stage. We start to see it for what it is, and then that's what, like, allows that the shame to soften, because it's just like, "Oh, I'm seeing it differently now that I have some time and space where I can examine this and see, like, oh, like, that's just kind of the stage. That's just how people are. Everybody doesn't know who they are, and they're trying to be cool, and so everybody's wearing a mask, and everybody has things they're trying to hide from other people so that they can stay safe, and then it's easier to call attention to others and point out their flaws, so that draws attention to them rather than me. So these are all games. It's when we zoom out, when we can take a look at it and see those dynamics, now it's less personal. Now I can be like, "Oh, okay, that's just the nature of that." And I can choose to believe something different at this point. But in that process, I need to release the shame attached to it, because the shame is what locks me in time. That's where I get stuck, is when I didn't know any better and I really had to protect myself. So that's where we start to suppress and shut down, or we start to morph into something else. You'll see like behavior patterns adapt from this when we don't feel like we can be who we are, when maybe I'm going to start lashing out for attention now because I'm not accepted the way I am. But we all want attention, we all want love, we all want those things. It's just kind of, it's seeing things as they are. And the further along you get, the more you experience the world, you just like really start to understand literally everybody has problems, everybody has struggles. These things aren't unique. It's just in your mind, it feels like you're the only one. And that's where the problem gets created.
Yeah, I think yeah, that's definitely true in terms of the more life you experience, the more you realize that all the stuff you believed, particularly in high school, is not true. But I do think, I mentioned that I taught a class this week, where the idea of flaws came up, and I think that in that conversation, this happened to be a group of women, but I think in that conversation where everybody sort of was like, "Here's the thing about me," or "Here's the sort of background of me," and they all shared things about growing up with each other and some of their flaws and things like that, it creates a different kind of community, a different kind of connection within those groups. I think about that too. The upside of just acknowledging it and just putting it into the world, like, "Hey, I'm not the greatest at this." They were talking at one point a little bit about the idea of, for example, one of these women is like super good at, that's a very technical skill around like business process mapping or whatever. In that instance, it was like, she's amazing at that. Like, why are we not leaning into her and her gift there versus like struggling through something that's hard for us? So I
Mhm.
guess what I'm trying to get at is, as we each own up the things we're not great at, it creates this space and this different kind of community. So I'd just like to hear more like how you think about that side of it.
Vulnerability is the bridge that connects us, so it is this, when I've, well, generally, if we're in a safe space with to do this focused work, it's like people are much more willing to do that. But the reality is like we want to kind of get to the point where we can do that in the context of any situation that's needed. Because in any dynamic, we everybody has wounds they're bringing to the table, and they're trying to hide things. And if I share a part of myself that like I'm struggling with another person, that actually, because we're all trying to pretend like we're perfect in our interactions. If I share something like I'm struggling with, that's an opportunity to connect with another person, because it actually lowers their guard. So when they start to lower their guard, they're like, oh, okay, I feel safer to share something about me because this person's not pretending. We have all these like kind of fake environments where everybody's just pretending, and that's what's like making them miserable. But it's just, I'm not saying just dump all over people all the time. I'm saying there are pretty regular opportunities to take a conversation a little bit deeper if we're able to reveal something about ourselves. That's actually how we build healthy relationships, is like over time you just start peeling back the layers and showing these things that you're not proud of or you have shame over or whatever. You start opening those things up so the other person can see that. And when somebody can see that and they accept you for that, that's very healing. It's a, hey, I'm really struggling with this. Somebody that's not willing to go there with you will probably run away. That's kind of the deal. So a healthy relationship is this evolving thing over time where I just start revealing more and more of myself to this person as I feel safe and comfortable with them. And the more I do that, the stronger the bond gets. So that's how you cultivate a strong community. That's how you cultivate a strong relationship is through vulnerability, and that is being human. If I'm wearing the mask and I'm just showing up as you expect me or how I should, that's not the real me. More and more I find myself like, a lot of people, you'll ask them how they're doing or whatever, and you're just like, oh, good. The just kind of the easy response. But I usually try to take it a step further and like actually give something real, or this is how I'm feeling today, or this is what I've got going on, or I try to give people more of a window to work with because that's how you start to create a connection with somebody. And it's just like it's kind of breaking some of these like surface patterns of just like, well, yeah, it's just easier to just go about my business. I think as a society, most people are really struggling with connecting with other people. Everybody feels alone with things. Once again, that the social media like increases the shame because everybody's putting the highlight reel out there. And so all these things kind of create like, oh, like, well, it's not safe for me to have these problems and this and that. But it's also creating a lot of these communities built around certain ideas. I think it's getting back to the basics in terms of like, yeah, do we have to be so superficial all the time? Or can we just, if I'm in the mask, then I'm going to be expecting that from the other person. But if they start to drop theirs, like I'm more likely to drop mine, where I can have a real conversation. But that's where we might have trust issues though, because maybe if I drop my mask and reveal something, now that person might use that against me. And that's where we have the trust issues. So we want to feel people out, and everything is like, we're giving a taste. I'm going to open up a little bit more over time. And that's how I really build trust with the person. And you'll see this commonly in dating, like people, they go like 0 to 100 pretty quickly. Oh, I just met this person and now like I'm absolutely in love with them. I'm like, well, you don't really know anything about them. They're like showing you this image of what you want and you think it's perfect, but behind that, usually takes time to see that what's actually going on there. People have to earn our trust in that way in terms of I need to see people over time for an extended period of time. I need to see them in different situations. I need to see how they treat other people. Those start to reveal character. That's what starts to reveal truth. And it's also, you don't just immediately throw somebody away because they have a flaw or they have a character trait that you don't like. If there's an edge to something, that person's probably got a wound there. Often with clients, I'll kind of say, there's kind of this like scale we operate from. Most people are mostly good, but they might have 20% that's kind of dicey, right? There's like some stuff they're still working on or struggles they go through. But if somebody's like 80% a train wreck and a red flag or whatever, well, that person's got a lot of work to do. Does that mean that person's all bad too? Because they got 20% that's pretty solid, probably. It's kind of seeing people in these perspectives of like, we all have things that are underdeveloped or that we've got a lot of pain behind. And if we have pain behind it, that's not going to be the cleanest interaction. Those are going to be our insecurities, our weaknesses. And so it's just understanding that anybody I'm dealing with has those things. And somebody that's polished, it's generally they're really good at the mask, or they've done a lot of work, and they're very authentic. And so because of that authenticity, you can trust them more because they're once again vulnerable about things. They're throwing things out there about themselves that can be perceived as risks, that can be perceived as bad things. So there's different versions of these things. And so we trust our gut, and we just like allow people to show us who they are. And we just know that nobody's perfect. Everybody has things that they need to work on. And it's through that work that you come back to yourself and feel at peace. And then that's where we start to integrate that shadow side of us, that part of us that's wounded. When we do that work, it's we come to peace with it. And now I have an awareness of the things I'm struggling with. And so I'm in that awareness, I'm not like I'm not lashing out at people. It's when things are like unconscious, when they're in that level of like, I don't really understand it. Like that's when I'm acting on things that I don't understand. That's where problems get created. But if somebody's like aware of a problem, it's just like they're in the process of working through it. And so it's not going to be perfect, but at least they're headed in the right direction. It's just that willingness to adopt that self-awareness that gives us access to better and better things over time. So nobody's a finished product. And they always say like, don't meet your idols or whatever, and it's or your heroes. This thing, because it's like we see the very produced version of people often. And like if you're gonna meet them in real life, you might not get that side, right? And so that's just the reality of it. And generally, the more produced something is, like the less real it's going to be. It's allowing these things to unfold, and vulnerability is really that access point where we can form connections over it. But it is a risk because once again, that person, if it's not the right person I'm sharing with, they could use things against me, and then that's causes us more pain. But it's like everything's an opportunity for me to level up in terms of like, okay, well, why did I trust this person with these things? What was I overlooking? We start to see people's tendencies. We start to see how they interact with things. If somebody gossips all the time, or we've caught them in lies or whatever it is, like we probably don't want to give that person a lot of information because they're zoned into that. So we start to develop the street smarts kind of through the mistakes we make. Like if we get burned by something, that doesn't mean we can't open up ever again. It just means like, well, I need to understand why it happened with that person. And I need to be a little bit more selective about who I really open up to. Most people, it's going to be some version of surface, but it's like, yeah, maybe I just give a little bit more than I usually do. And that's me seeking to connect, because if there's things people can latch onto that can connect us, that's really how that entry point for a relationship where people, I think, are kind of starved for some real stuff. We have to take some of those risks here and there to try and get a little bit more, because everybody's got the built-in coping mechanism of their phone of like every time they're uncomfortable, they can just scroll and get validated. If we want real human interactions again, part of that is, well, yeah, I have these flaws and I'm working on them, and I come to peace with them by accepting them and actually developing them. It's taking that journey, and that can be built in a community. And you often see that people bond over similar things, but it's just like, well, I would be mindful of not building a community based on your pain, the kind of victimhood stuff or whatever. We all have this pain and we're just going to talk about that pain over and over again. I would recommend it's like something like next steps. How do I move out of it type of thing?
In flaws or weaknesses, however you want to frame them up or think about them, are opportunities to get better, both in like a literal skill kind of thing, like if there's a skill you're trying to develop, or in this development space, I guess they're technically skills, but like an emotional health or mental health sort of
Mhm.
thing as well. So what's the primary things that you would talk to somebody about if they're working on, I recognize this flaw in myself, I want to be better. What are the steps they should be looking at?
Well, I think it's just generally it's a curiosity of why am I struggling with this? Yeah, why don't I feel like it's safe? And just allowing some exploration to happen around it, because it's like if we're always running from it, then we have all these patterns that are built up around it to keep us from facing it. But what if we just turn around and face it? And oftentimes it's not as scary as we think it is. And there are always people that can help us if we're willing to open up about it. We just kind of see it as like we all have things that where areas we've gotten left behind or things we struggle with. And And, those are opportunities for us. And but it has to come from that willingness. I need to realize that I'm not a little kid living at home anymore, right? I do have agency and power over my life, and I may be in relationships that reinforce some of this stuff, but that's the journey is like, well, if I'm really tired of something, it's going to show up once again in my mood. I'm going to be burned out, exhausted, irritable. I'm going to be pretty stagnant in my life too. I'm not going to be moving forward very often. I might feel very lonely. And that loneliness could show up in terms of I might even be in a relationship, but I don't feel emotionally connected to the person. So loneliness, we can feel alone in a crowded room. Okay. And that's this I'm alone with these problems. I'm alone with, nobody accepts me for who I am. And so that's where we have that big shame cycle. And so if you're feeling those things, we can reclaim the power back and we can realign these things in a healthier way. This is about building that healthier relationship with yourself, which is going to be based on self compassion. Because the first version of all of our relationships, I think, generally comes from shame. That's how we that's how we really progress in life initially is we're just trying not to get shamed. But then the other side is like, how do I reclaim the parts of myself that I've left behind or that I've locked away? So that's going to be more of a self-compassion of just understanding that things happen to everybody and there's all things we struggle with. And, the inner critic that you're talking about, that's going to be reinforcing what we already believe, and it's going to be keeping things the same. We just know that those are judgments of our past. So there's this kind of shift to what we could call like an inner teacher, which is kind of like getting back to your heart. It's like getting back to that's why meditation or this type of work where we start to create space so we can observe these situations differently and detach from the negative story of them. When we start to zoom out, we can start to see different scenarios playing out within that same situation. We can see different dynamics of it, and that's how we start to heal something is we see the same problem with different eyes. And it's through the eyes of non-judgment. It's through the eyes of I'm just observing something and I get curious about it and I start to see it in a different way. That's what frees me up emotionally. And that's what starts to shift to a healthier relationship with myself because I'm bringing truth back to it. So a lot of these things just get shut down because of a snap judgment we made in the moment when we're under tremendous stress. And so that got locked into our nervous system. We have to question that and we have to be willing to look at it differently in a way that makes us feel better. Okay. So when I say truth, the truth is going to be, it's going to be balanced. It's going to be neutral. It's going to be based on if I've developed this negative relationship with myself, well, that's through my own programming or the programming I receive through other people. And I can program new things. I can build a new relationship. It doesn't have to stay the same, but we have to question it. And we do it through creating that space where I'm trying to observe things rather than get wrapped up into the same thing I tell myself over and over again. That's based on low self-worth, not feeling good enough, shame, things like that. And so we always have that choice. And it may not feel like we have a choice because the story might be very ingrained in us and it might be very intense. And that's generally where we probably need some outside help to guide us through it. So somebody that can see you through a lens of potential rather than a flawed person. Because if you're seeing yourself as flawed and you can't get out of your own way about that, we need support to try and mirror different things to you to lead you down a path where you can reclaim your wholeness, where you can reclaim these parts of yourself and make it okay to go through those emotions. So we generally need a bit of a safe space. We need some time where you're less busy, where you're not just always pushing forward. We need to step back. We need some reflection. That starts to open these things up because you can only pretend so long before it really hits a wall. We're talking about chronic stress. So I'm in this stressed out state. My nervous system's actively engaged on negative things on a regular basis for a long period of time. That's generally the root of like any sort of disease or illness is this constant state of stress. And so all these things, it's you're going to get burned out, you're going to get exhausted, there's going to hit a point where you just can't do it anymore. But is that recognition that this isn't necessarily easy work, I would say it's extremely rewarding, but it can be easier if you have the right guide, if you have the right information uh, to kind of shine at different perspectives on these things that have been very painful for you. Because if you've always seen it as painful, odds are is you're going to have a hard time seeing it any different. That's where we need some outside support to really try and get you to move off of that, because that's for your own good. It's going to make you feel better. We get to step out of victimhood, and we get to reclaim our power and start to get some things moving in that department again. So with many things, when you get tired of feeling that way, that's when you usually do something about it.
For sure. We've said it multiple times, right? But the first step has to be that you get sick of your own shit.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be that way. You can adopt a mindset where you're curious about these things. And even if it is heavy, it's just like, oh, I know I'm going to like grow because of it. And so it's actually very rewarding. We can do it willingly, or we can like drag ourselves there. But regardless, it's for our own good. And like we want to do it if we start to develop a healthy relationship with ourselves, because you just kind of start to see it as self-care rather than a daunting task or something. You start to see it as like, oh, this is necessary for my health. This is how I feel good about myself. And so I want to take care of myself because this keeps making me feel better. But if we have a shame-based relationship with ourselves, generally on some level, like there can be some self-hatred there. And there's part of us like we kind of want to destroy ourselves on some level. And that's where, we have a lot of bad habits, a lot of negative emotions, and we do destructive things. It's because of those stories. And so a lot of addictions, all these things are anchored in those ideas. And so with this work, it's like literally everything across the board benefits from it. And it is just creating that space to, as corny as it sounds, to like love yourself again. There's just some stuff that's like happened that's made you question that. And so we all go through that on some level. There's nobody that escapes that. Some of us have more extreme versions than others. And we have no control over that. You're dealt the hand you are. And at any point in time, you can choose to change the game and start to build this relationship. And once you get a rhythm with it, it's kind of one of those things you don't really want to stop, because that you can really solve any problem from this place. You can really work through things and get to a healthier place with it. And anything we're looking for external is really to try and find peace inside. So, and all the external things in reality are a trap. They're nice to have, but it's like, well, if I need that in order to feel good about myself, well, like the inside part is what's real. It's like I don't feel good about myself for a reason, and we can handle that pretty quickly. We can get to the bottom of that, and we can start feeling better today. And then the external stuff can just be a byproduct of you living from that place of authenticity.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Once you start down this particular path, you don't want to quit doing it. At least that's been true for me. So
Once you get back connected with yourself, it's kind of like there's very well, there starts to be nothing that you would give up for the disconnection again. It's kind of just like, yeah, like why would I want to feel miserable all the time? Why
right.
would I want to pretend I'm somebody I'm not? You just start to like see it as kind of madness. You're like, oh, it's like everybody's walking around like zombies and stuff, like just not fully present. But it's sad. All these things, it's just like we've kind of built this very challenging system where a lot of things are unhealthy, and they're built with, I would say, probably ill intent, a lot of them, to sell products and things like that. It's easy to get stuck in the game, but once we create some space and get your freedom back and start to see things differently, you can't really unsee that once you go down that road.
Red pill, blue pill situation.
I mean,
Yeah.
some nature of that, yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
Well, I
Sure.
don't, it's just, my biggest thing has always been I want to be free. It's kind of my motivation is freedom to be me, freedom to do the things I want to do, freedom to do the work I want to do. Like, that's always been a driver for me. So I've rejected so many things to maintain freedom. And so I'm just very selective about what that means for me. I think it really serves most people to develop some sort of like conscious motivations, things that really matter to you, and align your life and your mindset to support that. And then also, it's that may mean disappointing other people. That may mean some people might not like you. That may mean like, you know, family gatherings might be a little uncomfortable, all these things. It's, it's a necessary part of the journey. If you want some growth, you have to get clear on who you are. And then you start doing things from that place rather than being reactive to all the things you're supposed to be doing.
So, for folks that are looking for something more specific, just to kind of close on our conversation today, if you had like a handful of tips or a handful of actions that you would point people to, where's the best places to start?
Start to question things. Where am I running for myself? What am I avoiding? And those are good journal prompts. If you want to kind of sit in silence and explore these things a little bit, what part of yourself do you fear other people seeing would be a good one? Where do you feel like you're trying to overcompensate or prove yourself to others? Like that's that's a pretty telling one as well. And what truth about yourself would actually bring you closer to the people around you? Okay, so that's that connection prompt of like what can I open up that would really make me feel seen by the people in my life. Once we allow people to witness us, that can be a very healing thing to feel like, oh, I'm not alone with this, or I'm not judged or rejected for it. That's why it's important to create those safe spaces of, people that you can open up to and really share things, because that's what allows us to create that path forward. If you're really, really struggling, it is kind of stepping into like it being able to admit that, like, hey, I'm not okay. I need some help. I need some support, and starting to look for that. You want to kind of participate in your own healing here, where if it's very tough to get going, there's probably some things you need to look at and let go of. And then also, I think we really shame ourselves a lot for failures or mistakes or things that went wrong. A good practice here would be to extract the lesson from that failure and talk about that rather than trying to show your highlight reel. Show like, oh, that was really struggling with this, but like this caused me to learn these things. So you're starting to see how things come full circle, and the pain actually created some benefits or some good life lessons for you. And we always want to try and work it to a positive, so it's just not left in this, oh, this is just a bad thing and there's nothing good that can ever come from it. And then, yeah, I think it's just, once again, reinforcing that idea of like, if you really need support, to find some people to reach out to. Being in isolation, that can tend to reinforce itself, where it can make us feel more and more alone with these things. And the reality is it's the human experience. We all have these common struggles, and there's plenty of people that can help if you're willing to open it up and be a little bit vulnerable about it. We'll wrap here so if you want to go deeper, if you want some insights on some of these things for your own life, you can schedule a free strategy session with me at my website, brandonthielk.com. It's just a 30-minute call, and I'll see what you got going on and how I can help. And also, I post daily on Instagram, all major platforms really at this point. So that's at Brandon Thielk. And you get some helpful tips and some insights there. And I also have a weekly newsletter I send out on Mondays. You can register for that at my website as well. So plenty of support if you want it. And I would love to have a conversation with you if you're open to it.
Yeah, awesome. We'll make sure the links to all of that are in the show notes. And just a reminder, a carryover from last week as we were getting ready to record episode 25, which is a couple episodes out from now. This is 23 today, but gearing up for an Ask Me Anything. So if you have questions you want answered, if you could drop us an email, we'll make sure the email address for that is in the show notes as well, or you can DM it, whatever's the best way for you to get those questions to us. We would love to go through some questions for some folks in episode 25.
Yeah, I'd love to share on some specific things for people if they're willing to open up and share that. And it can be kept anonymous. We're just looking for some real life problems from you guys so that I can kind of give my take on it and see if it can be helpful for you. So definitely take advantage of that. And we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, cool. All right, I'll
All
talk
right.
to you later, Brendan.
Yeah, we'll talk to you next week. Bye.